It's Maja's first book, and she's really great researcher and she knows what she's talking about there. It's really wonderful. So there are things about Hermetic thought that I didn't think about that Maja came up with, and some research on the history of stuff. It's like amazing stuff. So it's like,
what is Hermetic thought? Hermetic means closed, right?
It came to mean that in the English language because they would use it for like hermetically sealed,
right.
You know, like when you seal it off, and that was because they would use it in chemistry to hermetically seal vessels they would do operations in. And chemistry actually comes straight out of alchemy. And the relationship is that Hermetic studies are alchemy because alchemy comes from Egypt. The name for Egypt used to be Chem, and the Arabs called it alchemy, meaning from Egypt. And in Egypt, there was a dude named Hermes, and that's actually where Hermetic comes from, directly from Hermes, this god-like man. And I write about it in the book. It's hard to know who he is because people say he's a god, he's like a messiah, he's a dude, he's like a lineage.
sort of like Jesus Christ.
He's a lot like Jesus Christ, yeah, totally. He's just an avatar. And so it's a group of teachings. Hermetica is a group of teachings that are attributed to Hermes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, kind of like the Gospels are attributed to Jesus, but other people wrote them, and it's a little similar to that.
So what role did Adam play in your book? Seriously. Aside from the exploitive white male.
He helped a lot with the editing. I mean, I just put tons of stuff in there, and
Then he formed it?
we were presenting it to these people that had read The Secret, and probably a lot of it they'd be like, what do I do with this? Like a lot of scripture, and
Right.
I had like a lot of passages from the Hermetica to quote it, which
Long, arduous passages.
boring. So he really helped to, you know,
Sex it up.
to sex it up, to make it more exciting, you know, keep it real.
Keep it.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to be a little bit of a blabbermouth. I don't know if you can tell from the interview, but I can just like spout off about things forever. So he helped like cut it into a more succinct, manageable package.
And what role did Adam play in your book, if any?
He stayed out of the way. The book I pitched is the book that's published. We made the deal, we signed the contract, told him I'd see him in 6 months. I delivered the manuscript, and that was
How many pages did he slash from your beloved manuscript?
Adam is a writer's
Countless.
dream. He did not cut a syllable from my book. I said, you're a writer's
He claims you-
dream. You didn't cut a syllable from my book.
Is that
And
true,
there were
Adam?
probably a couple of syllables that could have been cut.
Well, yeah, that's
Actually,
right. I
you
didn't
helped
do
with
my
the
job.
spelling.
That's what it was.
No, I like to
You
think that
can
did
hear
as
it
well.
straight from the horse's mouth here.
Okay.
I grab credit when undue, and I also don't do proper role as an editor.
Okay. Apparently the book was so bad he didn't want his name or anything to do with it. Just okay, Gertz.
No, the fact is that book, went through the layout process, the design process was the most important aspect of that book, and went through it
Pictures
quite
are
a bit,
amazing.
and went through a lot of big selection process because the size of the book and all these other publishing issues were.
Now, I should add that Adam was so generous in allowing me to participate in the design process because I had a specific vision in my head. The way the book is laid out in certain chapters, that was there from the beginning. But and also the list of images and the excerpts from the books were all predetermined. But how they were laid out in relationship to one another, that was where Adam, and particularly Bill Smith, the designer, were really, really helpful. And once again, I have to compliment Adam on his generosity because, frankly, publishers don't want writers to get anywhere near the book design process. But I was very fortunate that Adam allowed me to participate in it. The three of us, Adam, Bill Smith, and I worked very well together, although there were a few instances where things were a little tense.
A little heated.
We had some nice creative give and take.
Sexual tension.
Oh yeah, there's so much sexual tension
Yeah,
between Adam Parfrey and I. It's just palpable.
Yeah.
It's just the sparks fly off.
Sex
We're
rears
together.
its ugly head once again.
I think accent on the ugly head, the two of us. Yeah. So. That came out the wrong way. I didn't realize that. No, keep that in. Keep that in.
No, It's real. We're keeping it real. So what surprised you by the process of writing and publishing your first book?
It was very surprising because I'm a speaker. Like I lecture a lot. That's how I got into this. I gave a lot of lectures on alchemy in the beginning of my sort of occult endeavors. I'm actually trained in biochemistry. Like I have a degree in biochemistry. And I come from science, and then I started just looking into the history of where science comes from, and it's all, of course, occult and alchemy related. So I was lecturing, and then Adam, came to see one of my lectures and really liked it, and he was like, "Well, we should write some kind of book." And I had never written a book before, so the idea of doing it was a little daunting, just because I don't really think of myself as a writer, even though I've written lots of,
Tracks.
Yeah, exactly, and also scholarly papers and things like that. I have lots of scientific papers I've written on extracting berberine or on fruit bats, things like that, but not like a book that would be easy.
But you're
for
blonde.
I know, it's totally amazing, right?
No, I have a question for you. Are you familiar with Athanasius Kircher?
I am actually, yes.
That's so
That was
cool.
great.
This past year, I put together a collection of all the first editions of Athanasius Kircher.
Wow.
Not only of Kircher, but his associate Gaspar Schott,
Yeah.
and a couple of the scientists who were either sympathetic to Kircher or his antagonists.
Oh,
As this
interesting. Which he had a lot of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What are you guys talking about?
Athanasius Kircher, the last man to know everything. There was a time, Luke, when it was possible for one person to know everything that there was to know about the scientific world. Because, for instance, in the 17th century, when Athanasius Kircher lived, the sciences were not
They weren't reductionists.
Exactly, they weren't reductionist, and the walls between the sciences were not as hard and firm. For instance, someone who studied astronomy would also study math. Someone who studied math would also study, did I say astronomy already?
There's a good example of that actually, because Schrodinger, where Schrodinger's cat
Schrodinger's
comes
cat,
from,
yeah.
he wrote a book called What is Life that was about his struggle to study biology, and he was literally not accepted into any universities to study biology because they were like, "You're a quantum physicist. You can't study in this field." And it's Schrodinger. So he was literally not allowed to study something in a cross discipline. So it's really, it's a big deal.
One of the cool things about Kircher is that he was a Jesuit. He was based in Rome, and he was the hub through which all the other scientists in Europe communicated through. He was an avid correspondent with every scientist in Europe at the time. They wrote to him, he wrote back to them. He was like the collector, Europe's collector of scientific knowledge. If you wanted to know something, you'd ask Kircher, and if he didn't know, he'd say, "Well, let me write to my friend so-and-so in Vienna, or in Warsaw, or something like that." And so there was this whole community of scientists. Kircher stood at the center of the scientific community of his time, and he's a great transitional figure between irrational science prior to the 17th century and the rationalism in science that came with Isaac Newton, who was just the very next generation after Kircher. So with Kircher, you have a very curious person who still believes in certain superstitions, but also tries to give science a rational rigor, which it didn't have before. But because he's transitional, he still can't give up the old ways as much as he's fighting for the new ways.
Well, and he inundated his works with his religion too, and the Christian Hermeticism. Like the Hermeticists, there was a whole bunch of Christian and Jewish Hermeticists too, where they would kind of interpose a lot of the different ideas with the ancient ideas, and so did Isaac Newton. Actually, would interpose a lot of his religious beliefs into his science, and he studied alchemy a lot
That's
too.
true. Most people don't
He
realize
wasted
That's
the
right.
last half of his life, didn't he?
That's right. After
Music of the
Principia,
Spheres.
absolutely, the Harmony of the Spheres. After Principia Mathematica came out, it was all alchemical works that never got published.
Yeah, we tend to think of Newton as being this super rational scientist, and he wasn't. He had this whole side to him that still was involved in daily practice of alchemy.
And he was an ecstatic too. People, the story where the apple fell on his head. He was actually under the influence of drugs when that happened. And it was a lot of the writers say that he was in an ecstatic state when he came to the realization of gravity, a religious ecstatic state, not just drug-induced.
Well, let's pull it all the way back. There are some people who say that when Moses came down the mountain,